So what you're looking at here is the finished product of a short 2D test animation that I did in Blender recently. I decided after finishing this that I would make a tutorial video going over all the things that I needed to know in order to make this. Eventually, I wound up getting all of the knowledge from multiple videos across YouTube, and as wonderful as that was, I thought it would be a lot more convenient if someone who was struggling the same way that I was could find this video and have all of their answers in one video. So this is going to go over how to import an image from outside of Blender into your animation sequence and have it show up in your final render. You need to enable an add-on for that. I will be going over that in the video. This video is also going to cover basic layout and navigation, where your layers are, how to add new layers, how to get rid of them. It's going to touch a little bit on adding a modifier to an entire animated sequence. So all of the frames in the animated sequence, I used a tint modifier to change the color of line art for an entire sequence that was animated post finishing the animation. This will also touch a bit on tweening, or in Blender, it is the interpolation, generating an interpolation sequence. That's a bit wonky and tricky, so I'll try and go as in-depth with that as I can. Anything else that I think of? There was a strange error message that I ran into using the interpolation, or the tweening rather, that I'll be including this as well, and how to get rid of it, just because it was a pain in the butt to try and figure out why I was getting this message that nobody else was and couldn't find an answer to. It was actually really easy. All of that aside, let's jump right in. So when you first boot up Blender, you land on the splash screen. You can go to your 2D animation workspace from the splash screen by going down here and clicking on 2D animation. Or if you're click happy and you accidentally clicked into a general workspace, you can go up to the File, New, and 2D Animation to load the 2D animation workspace. Alright, now coming into the workspace, there is a lot to look at, and it was kind of hard to figure out where the stuff I wanted to find was. So starting out, this right here is your canvas. This is what you're going to draw on, basically. You can zoom in and out of your canvas by using the middle mouse scroll button. If you scroll back, you zoom out and you have more room on your canvas. These borders right here indicate where your camera ends, so anything outside these borders your camera doesn't see. And then yeah, if you press up, you scroll in. If you press down on the middle mouse button, you'll accidentally do this, and this takes you into the 3D space, because Blender is still working in a 3D space even though you've loaded the 2D space workspace. This is okay if you accidentally come here. You can go back to your workspace really easily by just clicking the camera, and then you're back on the camera scene. I'm not going to go over it, but there is a way to draw 2D in the 3D space and have 3D stuff going on. That's really cool, but this tutorial is just going to cover basic layout and stuff like that. So this is your canvas. That's how you navigate your canvas. If you hold Shift and then click and... Okay, no, that wasn't it. My bad. If you click up here to this hand and you hold it down, you can go left and you can go right or up, down, anywhere you want to go. That's basically how you navigate this canvas. If you hold down, again, if you hold down the center button, it takes your canvas and moves it around in 3D space. I think a better way to describe really what that does, let me draw something real quick. I'll get into how to draw and things like that in a second. But say you have data actually there and you go into a 3D space, then you can go and see the data in a 3D space. So for some reason you wanted to do that, that's how you would do that. I'm going to go back to the normal menu, and I'm going to just Control Z to get rid of that. That's delete in almost every program. Or backspace in every program, whatever. Alright, so moving down here, we have our timeline. This is a grease pencil timeline, so this timeline is going to show all of your animation layers. So anything that you draw and anything that you animate is going to be here in layers, and it's going to be on this timeline. You can, by default, it loads into 250 frames. Your frame count is down here. You have your start frame and you have your end frame. Just by clicking on it, deleting it, and putting in the number of frames you want and then pressing enter, you can change your frames. If you need to zoom into this to see your frames better, it's the same mechanic, just scroll up on the middle mouse button. You can go to the sides with this bar down here, or scroll out in the middle mouse button, shrink it. It's pretty easy to move around that. Down here we have our play buttons, stuff like that. We also have our dope sheet, which I'm not going to get too much into. It's basically where all other data is stored. So say you imported a background image and you have that background image panning, like the clouds in my animation on this video. The keyframes for that will be down on this timesheet, not on the grease pencil one. So that is pretty much what this is. This is all other information and animations that's going on in the project. And these are just the ones that you're going to be drawing and animating with the grease pencil. And the grease pencil is just what anything drawn here is called. So any of these, that would just be grease pencil data. That's basically what that is. Now, obviously, this up here is where your brushes is. Well, let's go here first. So in case you didn't load into draw mode, this is a drop down menu that changes the modes, and you need to be in draw mode to draw on the canvas. You might have loaded in object mode, or you might have loaded in edit mode, but just change this to draw mode, and that's how you're going to be able to draw. And then yeah, your pens, pencils, stuff like that, everything you can draw with is this little menu right here. Select which one you like. This menu right here is the type of line that you're going to be using. So solid stroke is pretty much that. It's going to be a solid line. That's what you're going to be drawing your line work and draft work and other stuff with, I imagine. In order to change the brush size, that is going to be your radius menu right here. And then you just put in what you want it to be. Same principles, delete, put in a number, hit enter, and you've changed your brush size. This has pressure sensitivity if you have a tablet that you can trigger on and off, so size by pressure, and it also has strength. I have the strength up to 100. I don't know if it defaultly, up to 100, up to whatever this is. I don't know if it defaultly went to max or not. You can also trigger the strength pressure sensitivity with that right there. So defaultly it draws in black. If you want to change the color, you do have this over here. I honestly don't use this at all. I tick this little box up here, and then I hit this, and this loads the same thing, the same like color select thing, and then you can just select a color and it'll draw on that color. I tend to use this method to change colors a lot more often because I need to see my layers on this side, which is this little button right here. And this is pretty much the same menu that you have on your timesheet here. But if you have a lot of layers going on, this is a lot more useful. And you also need to be in this menu in order to add and remove layers. So if you wanted to add a new layer, say you want to make a draft, you would hit this little plus icon right here, and that'll add a new layer, which is called a GP layer. You can rename that like you'd normally rename anything else. Double click it, type in the name, hit enter. These little menus right here are affected down here as well. So anything you do, so if you click on this one, it is automatically clicked up here as well. This is basically just an extension but this extension allows you to add and delete layers. This also allows you to move layers up and down in your project if you need to do that, and this menu will not let you add layers, and it won't let you move projects up and down as far as I know. So yeah, this little icon right here is the mask, and this is what you're going to be enabling in order to clip layers to each other. It's not really like digital art though. You can't just clip it and be all like, oh, okay, it's clipped. You have to add a mask, tell it what to clip to. I'll get more into that when I start talking about the tint modifier and stuff like that. You have right here, which is your onion skin. So this will show you, like, it'll show you an onion skin if you know what that is. And then you can turn it off or on. Obviously, if you want to see your layers or hide them, it's a little eye icon. It's like that in most programs. This is just defaultly ticked. I don't really mess with it. It does whatever. And then yeah, if you want to lock layers, you lock layers. So your layer menu is over here. What you see up here is your collections. You can add a new collection with this little thing up here. If you want to link stuff, it's kind of like folders, I guess. But right here, your strokes, that is all of your brush data. So everything that you're going to be animating and drawing is going to go into the stroke menu. So as you can see, these are your lines right here. Anything else that you add will be up here in your collection because this is everything going on in the scene. So if you wanted to add a background image or something, it's going to show up in this collection up here. And this is how you're going to select it to do stuff to it. Moving on. We have our timeline figured out. We have our general canvas workspace figured out. We've got our layers figured out, how to add new ones, how to move them, where our brushes are, solid, stroke. All right, let's go into our fills. So say we have, well, we have an actual connected circle. That's not going to do anything. So we have this on our draft layer, and we want to fill it. It's good to keep these separate. We can go to our fill by going here to solid fill and going here to fill. And then remember, we can change our color up here. Let's just color it brown. And then we go over to it and we click on it and it'll fill this object. Even though this is a separate layer than the line art, if I turn off the line art, it will only fill within the closed area. So any closed area that you have, it's going to detect and it's going to fill. And if it's not closed, then it's going to fill everything. So try and keep this in mind when you're setting up your line art, because the more lines that you have going on your canvas, that's the more areas that it's going to close off if they're overlapping when you're trying to fill stuff. Let's create a new layer real quick. Go onto that layer, go to a brush, and I'm going to do a circle here. I'm going to go back down to my fills. I'm going to go back to solid fill, and I'm going to go to the paint bucket, and I'm going to fill here. If you have your layers turned off, it won't detect those lines, so just make sure that what you're filling doesn't have overlapping lines unless you want it to detect those areas. But yeah, that's how you would very, very quickly actually go across and fill things. The AI, like auto selection, detection, whatever, is really cool. It's really good for that. Okay, I will get into keyframing and stuff in a second as well. So again, that is mainly what you're going to use is your solid stroke to draw with, and your solid fill with the paint bucket to fill areas. So I'm going to go back to solid stroke, I'm going to go back to the brush, and I'm going to change this color back to black because that is what I want to draw with right now in draw mode. And I want to delete this because I'm not really using it. So I'm going to just delete everything on here because I don't need any of this data right now. I'm going to hit a new layer, and I'm going to just have a new layer. And this right here is going to be my first keyframe. So anything I draw right here, because this is where the layer was loaded, is going to be a keyframe. If I move this and say 20, and I press down on the canvas, then this loads an entirely different keyframe. So this is how you're going to be setting up your keyframes. You're going to go on your timeline where you want the keyframe to be, and then you're going to draw it. If you want to see behind it, again, that's onion skinning. And that loads a preview. It loads an onion skin. I'm assuming you know what that is. Okay, so left click on the mouse, you get this little box thing, and you select these. Right click, delete keyframes, and that will delete your keyframes. If you need to move them, it's the same thing. Just left click on them and then hold it down and drag them wherever you want them to be. Pretty sure that works like that in most other programs as well. Okay, so you want to import an image as a background. You want to first go into your edit menu, go into your preferences, make sure you're on add-ons, search up here, type in IM. You don't have to type the whole thing, it'll come up in the menu. And you want to make sure that this box right here, the import images as planes, is ticked on. If it's ticked off, then anything that you import will show up in your view while you're working on it, but it won't show up in your final render because it's basically loading as an empty reference. It's not loading as a finished thing. So it's good to keep that in mind, and it's good to enable this add-on before you try to import anything. Now, how you would add a background image, you'd actually go change your mode to object mode, and you'd go over to this menu and hit add. And then from this drop-down menu, you're going to want to go to image, and you're going to want to go to images as planes. And then select wherever you have the image that you want to import. Go ahead and find that. I think mine is in short animation right now. Yes, sky background, and then import images as planes. And that will load this into the scene. Now, if you hold down S after this drops in, to keep it hold down, you get this little thing. If you move your mouse up and down, it allows you to scale. S allows you to scale in and out. So if you click it after you've scaled it, then hit S again. Clicking places it, and S scales it. If you hit G, if you hold down G, then you can move it around wherever you want it to go. Those are just basic Blender keyboard shortcuts. You also have in this side menu what these shortcuts are for. So you have move here, you can manually move, or you have your rotate, you have your scale, you have your transform. So those were just the shortcuts for those things. Hold down S, move up and down, click to place, hold down G, move wherever, click to place. Alright, so you have your background image, and you want your background image to do a simple pan or some other sort of animation. Then you want to bring up this sheet down here. Try and click on this. Okay. Now you want to tick this little box right here, the auto keying, and make sure that this is on, because as soon as you move this object, it's going to insert it as a keyframe, and then whatever you do to it after that, it's going to record the action. So I'm going to click here, I'm going to move it just a little bit so it can register as a keyframe. And now we have our first frame. And this is all of the data from that. I'm not going to go too complex into this, but this basically just records its location transforms and stuff like that. So say I wanted this to pan a little bit. I want it to end here, so I'm going to drag it to 60. I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to just move it over like this, and then let go of it. As soon as I let go of it, it's registered as a keyframe. Again, if you need to move a keyframe, you can hold down left click, select the keyframes you want, and then move them with the mouse button wherever you want them to be. Or if you need to delete them, just select them, right click, delete keyframes. If you want to insert keyframes, there are keyboard shortcuts here. It's I to insert keyframe, all these little menus here by right clicking. You can look into that on your own. I don't need to go over that really right now. So yeah, if you go back to frame 1 and you press play now, that action is going to be recorded, and that's how you would do a simple pan of something. And again, since this object is not a stroke, it's going to be on this timeline instead of the grease pencil timeline. Now, right now, you're not selected on your stroke, so that's why all of your layers and stuff went away, because up here you're selected on your sky. So you need to go back down to stroke to bring back the view for all of your layers and stuff, because this menu is only showing grease pencil stuff, so whenever you move away from it, it no longer shows that. Just to point that out real quick. Okay, so that's how you would bring in a background. You would have to import it as a plane and then move it around with this stuff, make sure you have the actions recorded, all that good stuff. Alright, now to draw something. I'm going to go back here to my first keyframe. I'm going to use this thing right here in object mode and select this. I'm sorry, I'm going to switch that to edit mode actually, and then select this. If I hit X on the keyboard, then all of these like menu things come up. And I'm going to just go ahead and delete that. That way I don't have that stroke in my thing. I'm going to go back to draw mode now, and I'm going to go a little bit over how to keyframe, or how to auto between, I mean. So in draw mode, in my pencil, solid stroke, black, all that good stuff, radius 20, I have pen pressure on. I'm going to draw, just say, a little thing like that. And then say I want that thing to move. So this is going to be my other frame, and I want this to be my next frame. Now, in order to in between an action in Blender, you need to be in between. Well, click on the fucking keyframe, but you need to be in between the areas that you want to tween, and then you go here and you go to edit mode, interpolate, and this is going to be your tweening. You're going to hit sequence, and it's going to automatically move this and create keyframes for you. Now, this gets tricky because it doesn't handle complex strokes very well. So if you have something simple like this, it's not going to have a problem. If you started your first stroke line in the same place, so you started drawing here and went this way, and then your second stroke you started drawing here and went this way, this is simple enough data for it to understand what's happening and for it to move it correctly. But if well, okay, if you want to get rid of the in-betweens, just remove breakdowns, takes away all of them. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to draw a different thing that starts at a different point and is slightly more complex to try and illustrate what happens. I'm going to go back here. Okay, so say you want to in between these two things. You go back to Edit, Interpolate Sequence. I guess I wasn't funky enough. That kept track of it pretty well, actually. Okay. Let's remove that breakdown since that wasn't a good example. Let's delete these keyframes. Let's draw some hair, because that tends to mess it up pretty quickly. Alright, new keyframe. Okay, so that's a lot for it to keep track of, right? Okay. Edit mode. Interpolate sequence. Alright, now this is what I was trying to get to happen. If you have too much data going on at once, it's going to get really confused and do stuff like that. So just make sure when you're moving things, that the things that you're moving are on their own layers. So if you have a mouth, if you have an entire face turn, it's better if you're going to be using the interpolate to have the mouth moving on its own layer, the nose moving on its own layer, eyes moving on their own layer, stuff like that. So you don't have a lot of funky stuff going on when you're trying to interpolate a really complex or detailed thing that has a lot of lines going on. To avoid this happening, just make sure that you have your layers separated well. Okay, now I'm going to remove the breakdowns because I no longer need that. A way to do this, if you want to keep, I'm going to delete that as well. I'm going to get rid of this layer because it looks like garbage right now. A way to do this if you have a lot going on and you don't want to separate it by layers is, instead of drawing a new keyframe, so I'm going to do this. I'm just going to example right now. Okay, so say you have this. Alright, so pretend that you have a lot more going on than that. A way, I'm actually, okay, opacity is over here. I'm going to turn the opacity down on that because this is actually just going to be a draft idea for this. And then we're going to draw it one more time. And the reason that's a draft is because I'm going to create the other keyframe of this by moving this set of lines. And the reason I'm doing that is because if I create the other keyframe by going into edit mode and selecting, and then remember G lets you move things around. If I select them, these are transforms, and transform them manually, then it will keep track of the data and it won't break up all weird like that. If you want to select more than one thing, also, I saw this left out of a few videos. You select it and then hold shift and then select with shift down. Just keep selecting the things that you want to move, and that's how you multi-select things. Oops. This actually takes a lot more time than I thought it would. I'm going to rotate this and G to move it. Okay, so I have these moved. and this keyframe, remember, was created from moving these keyframes around. So I'm going to Interpolate Sequence. These frames are only 20, so I'm going to change my 20 count to just so you can see better. And by moving them manually like that, it keeps track of it without getting all wonky and twisting into itself and stuff like that. So if you do work with a lot of different lines and a lot of different stuff going on at once, and you want to use this Interpolate Sequence method, your best bet to get it to not warp in and out of itself all crazy when you have a lot of lines going on and you don't want to use different layers is to just go into edit mode and make your new layers by clicking on the frame you want to start on and then selecting your old lines and dragging them over and positioning them, because that better tells it what you're trying to do and it doesn't get really confused that way. So I wanted to go over that a bit more in depth because this was an area that took a bit for me to really wrap my head around. And some people were doing this and getting these smooth, simple animations, and then when I tried to do it, it went all crazy because I just had too much going on. So I know I got a bit lost trying to explain that. I hope it made sense. Sorry about that. Remember, if you need to break down a sequence, you just go to the Interpolate menu and I clicked off of something. Okay, well, apparently I can't do that. I'm just gonna delete them. Normally you can just go into the Interpolate sequence and remove breakdown. Something else about the Interpolate sequence, it will automatically load its type as linear. If you click on this menu, you have custom and you have all of these different things. So you can add like bounce mechanics to stuff and stuff like that. That's something I encourage you to look up more yourself to try and understand. I'm not going to go in depth about these. In most cases, linear works fine for just simple tweening in and out of keyframes. For me anyway. Alright, so what else did I want to cover in this? Right, so for convenience sake, we're going to just pretend that we have an entire timeline full of animated goodness going on because that's going to take, I'm going to go back into draw mode so I get rid of the edit icon. But yeah, that's going to get rid of a lot of time wasted drawing a bunch of stuff out. If you need to change the color of anything that you've done, say you're really far in a project, but like, oh, you don't like the line color or something, then you can very easily do this by going over to this menu over here and clicking on modifiers. So add a modifier. If you go over to color and you go to tints, then it'll automatically apply a modifier, well, to pretty much everything that's going on. So you'd want to go over to your layer and clip it to the layer that you want it to affect. That apparently wasn't the layer. So yes, this layer. Yes. So make sure that you clip it to the layer you want it to affect. The mode is stroke and fill, and you adjust your color here. Okay, I apparently had this clipped to the wrong layer. Or wrong layer selected, whatever. But yeah, and this will change the color of your entire project. So all of the keyframes and everything else, that's how you change the color of a major area. Anything pretty much that was made with that layer will change using a tint modifier. If you want to delete it, it's just this little X right here. You can delete it, easy peasy. Now what else did I use in the animation? I am trying to think. These modes, you can toggle between draw mode and edit mode by pressing tab. and you will be going back and forth depending on how you're going to be animating things. So it's good to keep that in mind that you can toggle easily using tab. And it's very informative, so anything that you click or that you hover over, it'll tell you what it is. And if you have any questions about it, you can just Google that really quickly. It'll kind of explain in a more in-depth way what these things do. But yeah, that's the basic interface. Your timeline down here, your layers, again, it's this little green icon here to add layers, delete layers, or move layers as you need to. These are your collections. If you want to add another image into your project, remember that you need to be in object mode. It's going to be add image, images as planes. This is something else I forgot to touch on, so I'm throwing this in here as well. If you are creating keyframes by editing your previous keyframe for the interpolation, you can also, instead of edit mode, go into sculpt mode. And what sculpt mode does is it allows you to interact with the lines a lot differently. If you look at these are your sculpt menus, and you can grab them and you can push them, so it becomes a lot easier to warp them over a draft shape. And this isn't something I demonstrated using the edit mode because I just kind of moved them and dragged them over. But this mode, the sculpt mode, will allow you to better warp them into place over your draft. So I just wanted to quickly add that in and show off this mode and this feature if you're going to be using the edit mode for the interpolation. There was another thing that I also wanted to add in that I forgot about, and that is how to create different strokes. So, for example, you have your grease pencil timeline here, and say you have one character with a million layers, fully animated, mapped out, and you want to add another character, but you don't want to have to go through all of these layers to find the new character's layers and start working on them. That's where creating a new collection comes in. So if you create a new collection and you go onto this collection and you go into edit mode, and you go into object mode, you can add another grease pencil collection that you can work with. So you can separate your characters or other animated things that are going on if you have a lot of layers going on. Go ahead and just add a blank. And now you have another stroke to start working with. Remember that your layers are on this green icon and it's a blank, so it doesn't have the line and the fill that the original stroke default grease layer came up with. So you're going to have to just create a new layer to start putting data onto this. And remember that this timesheet will only show information for the grease pencil stuff that you're on. So right now you're on this new grease pencil, which would in theory be your second character or third character or something else in the background moving, but you want to go back to your first character and work on them more, you'd have to go up into this menu and go into your original stroke and fills to load up this. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well, because that is another way to kind of keep your workspace organized and to keep something that has a lot of layers, if you have multiple characters that have multiple layers, more cleanly separated so you could more easily work on them. Okay, so this is actually recorded after I finished recording the other video because I forgot to mention it in it. This is how you're going to clip layers to each other. So say you wanted to put shadow on this, but you only wanted it to affect the skin tone. You're going to want to use masks for that. So you're going to create a new layer and turn this little icon right here, mask layer. Alright, so this is the layer that's going to have your shadow, and you want it to be clipped to your skin tone, which is what your fills is. So make sure you have mask selected, and then go down to your mask menu, and you're going to hit the little plus icon and pick the group that you want it to be clipped to, and I want it to be clipped to the fills. So now anything that I draw on this layer should be clipped to the skin layer. I'm going to go to the solid fill brush and use this because I didn't go over this very much in that video as well either, so I wanted to show off what I was talking about with adding shadows and stuff quickly with the solid fill brush. So the solid fill brush goes around and we'll just quickly add things like that. So yeah, it's really convenient for adding like shadows across things very quickly. There is a color issue happening with that though. And that doesn't work. So that is an interesting issue. I'm actually not sure why that isn't drawing in that color. Oh, that also reminds me though. Well, okay, I'm just gonna do a solid stroke then. Or is that just what the color is? I guess that's just the color I picked. Whatever. Anyway, that reminded me of the other issue that I ran into with the in-betweening that I forgot to mention that was very hard to find a solution for. When you're in sorry, when you're in the in-between, let's draw anything. Oh, that's in betweening the mask. That's fine, whatever. But yes, go back to edit mode, go to interpolate sequence. You will get this cannot interpolate as current frame error message. And the reason that you're getting this is because you have a keyframe, like your marker is on a keyframe. That's the only reason why that message is popping up. That was so hard to find, and like nobody apparently ever had their marker on a keyframe. So yeah, so make sure when you're interpolating sequence that you just have your marker in the middle of the sequences. Otherwise, you're going to get that error message, and that is just how to get around that. Alright, I think that is everything that I wanted to cover in this video. That was everything that I wanted to figure out when I was making that animation for myself for the first time. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and leave them down below. Hopefully this helped out someone. Yeah, thanks for watching.